What is going on, guys? It's Nick from Surfcasting Island. I hope everyone had a happy holidays and a happy new year. And without further ado, the topic of discussion today is minnow plugs in depth. Oftentimes, the questions I get as a surfcaster, whether it be on the beach, through my blog posts, is, Nick, why do you use minnow plugs so often? What makes them so great? How do you throw them? How do you use them? Where do you throw them? These are all very common questions I get. And I'm going to be totally honest with my audience. Aside from the bucktail, minnow plugs are probably my favorite lure to use for so many different reasons. One of them reasons is I caught my personal best striper, which was 40 pounds last fall. So I've always heard that, minnow plugs catch fish, but they also catch big fish. They catch small fish. They catch slot fish. So you have such a wide array of fish they catch, size-wise. They also catch bluefish, and that's a whole different topic of discussion. But we are more concerned with how they draw striped bass and why they're such an effective lure, especially to use at night. And I will shortly get into why. Whether it be any plug I'm throwing, a bucktail, a needlefish, a dot, a bottle plug, I am primarily concerned with two factors. That being the depth of the water I'm fishing and the presentation of the lure I'm fishing in respect to the bait pattern that's around, available at the time, how accessible is it, how much of it is there, so on and so forth. So for matter's sake of this video, we're going to be talking about surface swimmers, subsurface swimmers, and I guess you could call some of these deep diver swimmers. They don't have a huge bill, but I'll get into that. What we're going to talk about first are wake baits. Similar to a metal lip, these lures just produce fish unbelievably. The first lure I'm going to show you is the Redfin. I'm pretty sure this is a 5-inch. Don't quote me on the length. But it's an excellent lure. It was originally introduced to the West Coast. Fun fact, it was actually one of the guys that actually introduced it to the East Coast was the legendary surfcaster by the name of Percy Heath. And they're just such a great lure for skinny water. This is something that's going to work on top, very light, moderate conditions. You don't want to throw this in rough water. It's not gonna handle the turbulence of some of the other lures I'm going to show you. But this is good. I usually throw this in anywhere from 7 to 8 feet of water, less on a dropping tide typically. Something very shallow. When the fish are really finicky and spooky, they work great at night as well. And the biggest misconception with minnow plugs as a whole is that people hear the word minnow and they think right away it has to pertain to some type of long skinny bait, cigar bait. I've thrown every single plug up and down this table I have to my left, and that is not the case at all. I've caught bass on minnow plugs when they've been feeding on bunker, when they've been feeding on squid, when they've been feeding on herring. What I feel is more important is, like I've mentioned, is the size and the presentation of the lure that you're fishing over anything else. It's such a consistent catching bait, especially in those back bait applications. Yes, it is a versatile lure. I have caught them in the open beach as well as inlets in light to moderate light conditions. But as a whole, like I've said, I really think that this plug thrives in the back bays, especially in the early spring when these fish are just starting to come up and feed. Just to make a comparison, this is a 7-inch Redfin. Obviously, if there are bigger bait around, like I was mentioning, on profile and how you present the lure based on a profile bait pattern that's around, is a 7-inch Redfin. So this is something I would throw when there's herring or there's bunker, when you get like really big fish that are spawning out, just spawning out, or big pre-spawn holdover fish. This would be my go-to if there's a lot of schoolies around and, you know, near to slot size fish. Maybe I'll go with the smaller size, all depending on, you know, the wind and tide and how that's going to affect casting, so on and so forth, where I want to put that bait. But yes, out of all the lures on the table, these are the biggest niche lure. And what I mean by niche lures, they serve a purpose, a very narrow purpose, I should say, because out of all the minnow style plugs, you know, they only work on the surface. You can't work it shallow, you can't work it deep in regards to dropping in your rod tip or raising your rod tip. So that's something that can take into consideration. The fish have to be chasing out individuals. They have to be, you know, there has to be just the right amount of separation in the bait, and they have to be keyed in on something that looks like this. So that's just something to take into consideration, and I'll get into the next style lure. Okay, so the next style bait I'm going to be talking about is subsurface swimmers, and kind of that area, that targeted area of the middle of the water column. And the first bait I'm going to talk about are mag darters. This is the medium size. I call this one the medium mag. Excellent, excellent early springtime lure. I've done unbelievable on and all the way through the season, the fall. And the types of baits that are around where I'll typically throw this type of plug was we get that, you know, the mullet run, those little finger mullet, those 4 or 5 inch ones. When that run typically starts early September all the way through September, early October. This is just an excellent, excellent presentation. And it's also great in the early spring when there's bunker and such around in April, you know, end of March, beginning of April, when you get that western sound bite. If I know there's bigger bait for sure, like adult bunker, shad and stuff, bigger body baits, then I would throw I call it the mega mag. It's the size up. And again, pulled many, you know, many teen size fish. I've caught 20-pound fish on this plug, and it's just a great imitation, like I keep talking about, you know, in respect to the profile plug and the profile bait you're trying to match that plug to. And since, you know, you're focusing on the middle of the water column, it's a subsurface swimmer. It's obviously going to dive deeper than a Redfin because it doesn't go on the surface, obviously. And what's interesting about the mag darter as opposed to any other plug on this table that I have is the lip is actually integrated into the head, which is a rather interesting design. Personally, I like it. It's very different. It's very similar to a regular darter in regards to that, how the lip is pretty much the slanted head. But people tend to confuse darters and mag darters. Some people say, oh, it's the same thing. Mag darters and regular darters are completely different. I don't care what anyone says. Mag darters are swimmers. Regular darters, they zigzag side to side, completely different action. Yes, they're both plugs in the world of striped bass fishing, but they serve two totally different purposes. Not to digress on another area, but a regular darter is something you fish in very shallow, fast moving water that's sweeping. This, I excel in light to moderate light conditions. Like I've said over and over again, primarily in the back bays. But plugs like this, you can throw in the surf much more consistently than that of a Redfin. Because they're weighted, they have a mag system where it loads from the back, and when you shoot it out, you get a further cast. Then the weight gets integrated once that lure lands, and it's balanced evenly, have you well. Something else I would like to hit on. Yes, I would still, minnow plugs as a whole, I don't like to fish them over that 8 to 10 foot mark, especially if you have an incoming tide where the water is getting deeper and deeper as opposed to shallower and shallower. I feel like they excel more in shallow water. But something I'd like to add about Minnow plugs is the fact that head design is crucial. Like I talked about, the head being integrated into this plug, the lip being integrated into this plug, I should say. The reason why the Redfin, I should have mentioned this earlier, the reason why the Redfin is a surface swimmer is look at the head design. The lip is so far back on this plug. It's about 1 inch back on this plug. It prevents it from going down. You know, the lip on a mag daughter is literally right at the front, slanted where the screw eye, not a screw eye, I think this may be through wire. Don't quote me on it. But it's literally right there, which causes it to dive, as well as its weight helps as well. But again, you could do so much with a mag daughter, and out of all the plugs on this table, it's got to be up there in terms of one of my favorites. I always carry 1 or 2 in my bag, regardless if it's the spring, fall, summer, what have you. So I'm pretty much going to integrate 2 plugs into this section of the video. The first one I'm going to show you is a Yosuri Hydro Minnow. Again, this is, you know, you're focusing on that middle of the water column, middle to upper portion of the water column, and these things just pull fish. They're very similar to the SP Minnow floater. I'll talk about SP Minnows later on, but it has you know, a very similar profile to that. And just like the mag daughter, it's loaded from the back, so you get a really far cast. But they're a very good skinny water plug. Like I said, that 8 foot and less I would want to focus in on. And like I just keep saying over and over again, it does not matter what kind of bait is around. I repeat, it does not matter what type of bait is around. You catch on this plug when there's spearing the smallest bait, the size of my pinky, all the way up to, you know, foot and a half bunker. But again, like I said, it warrants the conditions. You have to have the right conditions. If I have to go really, really deep, it's just, and you have a heavy sweep, I'm just gonna go to a bucktail or a needle or something I can cut the water column. But, you know, 90% of my fishing in the spring, early spring, all the way through the mid-spring before I fish inlets and up front, really, it's going to be these types of plugs. There's no need to throw a 3-ounce plug in the back when the maximum depth you're throwing in is 8 feet. Which brings me to my next plug I'm going to show. This is an old school bomber. You know, I don't use bombers as much because we have, you know, options that are just as good, if not better. The biggest knock on a bomber, and same thing with the Redfin, is their castability is not that good. You lose a lot of castability with a plug like this because they're not loaded. Yes, can you do modifications to the plug? Of course you can. You could drill holes and fill it with a certain amount of cc's of water, but I just feel like at the end of the day, if you could do that, just buy a plug that's designed to cast further. In doing so, when you fill this with water as well, you're going to change the action on that plug. But neither here nor there. Both of these lures, the Hydro and the Bomber, they catch fish. Back in the day, guys didn't have many options. They only had Redfins and Bombers, things that weren't loaded. So they had to stick to their guns and the very few things that were out at the time. Fortunate for me and the era I've grown up in, there's so many different options between Minnows, mag daughters, so on and so forth. So I'm very, you know, I'm very thankful in that regard to all the technology we have. But yeah, between these 2 plugs I've talked about in this segment, I would definitely choose the Hydro Minnow because of the castability, and that's such a big thing. The further you get out into that rip or that moving water, the better shot you have at catching a fish. It's just as simple as that. Sometimes you gotta get out to the fish. Other times it doesn't matter, and they're right in front of you. So you always have to weigh out your options, so on and so forth. Which is gonna bring me to my last plug in this video. So the last plug I'm gonna show you guys in this video, yes, I could fish it shallow. Yes, I could fish it around inlets and deeper water, so on and so forth. But it gets to the point, like, If I have to go heavy enough, I'm just going to go to a bucktail or something that really cuts the water column. But if I feel like these fish are really keyed in on minnow style plugs for whatever that reason may be, or for whatever warrants that situation, there's nothing like the SP Minnow. I know this is a floating one, but for matter's sake, let's just say this is a sinking one. I didn't have a sinking one on hand, but to start off, yeah, this is the exact color I caught that 40-pound fish on last fall. And it taught me a lot about the minnow plug, pretty much, because I used it heavily ever since I caught that last fish. But yeah, the sinking plug works great in turbulent water, especially you have a heavy northeast in the fall. You got big water, big waves. This water can handle it. This lure can handle that water, I should say. Skinner talks about, he has a couple great videos and demos up about how to throw an SP Minnow in turbulent water. And as simple as it sounds, they just pull fish. I'm not going to go much into head design because it's very similar to that of a mag darter and a bomber. And it pretty much has the same cadence, that tight wobble side to side. It's a rattle, same thing. It has the mag system of a mag darter or a hydro minnow to amplify those casts. And like I keep saying over and over again, castability is just such a huge factor sometimes when you have to reach these fish. And unlike some of these other plugs that won't reach them, you'll reach them with a plug like this, especially if you have a heavier onshore wind. If you have an offshore wind at your back, forget about it. You can launch this 50, 60, 70 yards, no problem. But this pretty much concludes my discussion on minnow plugs. I hope you enjoy it. I hope it also expanded your guys' vision and outlook on these plugs. Not only are intended for small, skinny style baits, they can mimic many other things. They can mimic needlefish, bunker, shad, herring. I could go up and down the list of what these things can mimic, and they just catch fish. It's as simple as that. It's something you just cast out, wind in, and give it a jerk every 2 or 3 turns of the handle. So without further ado, please subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, at surfcasting_the_island. That is my public Instagram page as well. So share it with as many people as you can. Give it a thumbs up. I look forward to seeing you guys in my next episode. Thank you. Have a nice day.